why don't we just start by you telling me, I guess, who you are and who you serve, and we can go from there.
Yes, sir. So my quick story here. My name is Miguel Mendes. Basically, nowadays I work as a fitness online coach and a sports nutritionist, but my background was actually in cookery and food production. So initially, I wanted to be a chef because I've always loved food. I've been cooking since I was a kid. I remember when I was maybe like 6 years old, asking my mom to help with cooking and whatnot. But that's a long story. Basically, I wanted to be a chef. Went to cooking school. That's my bachelor's cookery and food production. But then eventually decided that life wasn't what I thought it would be, simply because I was feeling drained, overworked, and it was not the same as cooking for myself or my family or friends. And I've also always had a big passion for fitness and nutrition. Well, not necessarily always, because growing up I was that kind of chubby, overweight kid playing video games, eating like pizza, chocolate croissants and whatnot, drinking chocolate milk.
Mm-hmm.
But and yeah, so this is important context. I might go a bit too deep here, but being that overweight kid and sometimes being made fun of, having kid boobs and whatnot. So I love playing video games, but I didn't really like my body composition. And like I played sports here and there, but never really did much about it. Like I was just happy doing what I was doing. Um, but then I saw this guy. He used to play World of Warcraft. I've been playing World of Warcraft since since launch, so 2004, on and off.
Yeah.
Um, and basically, what happened was this guy was not obese, but almost obese, and in 1 year he went from very overweight to very fit. And I was like, wow, like if he can do it, maybe I can do it. And I joined the gym. When I joined the gym, I started learning more about fitness and nutrition. And eventually, when I decided that I didn't want to become a chef, I decided I wanted to kind of pivot more into nutrition. So that's when I moved to London, study a master's degree in sport and exercise nutrition. That was fantastic. Started working with general population athletes. Learned a ton about physiology and human metabolism, nutrition for performance. And then I remember thinking initially I wanted to work with athletes, but I was already kind of working with some just people in the general population. And it's very different working with an athlete and working with the gen pop. But I
Mm-hmm.
really like the fact that I can help people that were maybe in a similar like mindset that I grew up with. That whole,
Mm-hmm.
you're not happy with your body, you're not, happy with your relationship with food, but you're not sure how to, get out of it. And long story short, because I'm gonna end my rent here, I've been doing the online coaching since 2019, so that's almost 5 years now.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I do most of the time. Also, I write articles online. I do some things on the side, but that's kind of the elevator, not so small pitch here of who I am and what I do.
Sure. No, I like it. It sounds like you have a very, um, what do I say, robust background and a very unique background. And I want to talk about that being that overweight kid, diving into video games, playing World of Warcraft, and kind of using one person as that spiritual guide, but kind of by proxy. You know, we always have that guide that helps us. We have the Obi-Wan Kenobi, Phil from Hercules, and all that. And it seems like you kind of latched onto that guy, even though it was like I said by proxy, to where it was kind of from afar. I guess walk me through where that call to action came from, and that moment when you kind of said, okay, now it's time to take action.
Okay, so it's not, most people, they would probably expect me to say something like, I was really, feeling miserable. I didn't like how I looked and I took action. It didn't happen like that. It was very organic, actually. So growing up, so I've been snowboarding since I was a kid. Like I've been snowboarding since I was 5 years old. And as a teenager, I used to play rugby. And so basically, what happened was one day I went on this snow trip. I took a nasty fall, injured my shoulder pretty badly. I got misdiagnosed. It turns out, like, I later found out that I had a broken bone, but it got misdiagnosed as like just tendonitis. and they told me take 2 weeks off and go back to playing rugby. I took 2 weeks off. I went back to playing rugby, and I couldn't tackle because I had a lot of pain, like a lot of pain, and basically went to do another like test on my shoulder. It turned out that I had a small fracture. That's why I was in so much pain, and I had to do some physiotherapy. And when I was doing it, they recommended, why don't you go to a gym to strengthen your shoulder, because it's going to help to improve your mobility. You'll be able to go back to playing rugby. And at the time, I'm not going to lie, physiotherapy wasn't fun. It was pretty boring, actually. But when I wasn't playing rugby, so I had more free time. And when I wasn't playing World of Warcraft, I was probably just, and I didn't just play World of Warcraft. Like I played a lot of video games, but when I wasn't playing video games, I would probably be on YouTube or websites kind of learning more about video games, like how to optimize my builds, how to be better at the game and whatnot. And while I was doing that, I found this guy. His name was Dreams with a Z, like Dream Z. It was like super cheesy, but basically, he used to say that he was a nerd at heart, but then he got shredded. So his whole thing, like the motto was "Eat nerds, get shredded." Basically, for some reason, I was a teenager at the time, 16, and that really resonated with me. And I was like, "Oh yeah, like I'm a nerd, but if he can get shredded, I can get shredded." And then I was like, if I have to go to the gym to do physiotherapy, I might as well learn more about the gym, and maybe I can get shredded in the process. So initially, I just joined the gym because I had to, but then I started seeing all the bros lifting weights and these jack dudes, and I was like, like how do I get there? And basically, what started as me going to the gym maybe twice a week just to do, very light rehab work, eventually transitioned into me going to the gym 3 times a week, doing the classic chest and biceps, back and triceps, legs and shoulders, learning more from the bros, learning more about nutrition. And that was the initial point. So it's not like, I took action because I was at this point in my life, like everything was about to fall apart. It was just very organic.
Sure. No, it sounds like there was kind of like all the right pieces, kind of all in the right place. Where maybe if a year prior, if you would have stumbled across Dreams, you might not have put as much stock into it. But it kind of happened to be during a time where you're rehabbing an injury, and if you're like, you know what, like you said, it's organic. Now's the right time.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. I also like how you kind of learned under Professor YouTube. I think that's how pretty much everybody gets their start, whether it's fitness magazines or YouTube or Gym Bros, all of the above. You kind of learn from your network from there, and then you kind of took that a step further and went into a graduate school to learn nutrition and everything like that.
Oh yeah, okay. So I love YouTube. Don't get me wrong, but learning about video games, like even YouTube. Okay, YouTube is a fantastic tool, and you can learn a lot from it. But when you are not, like if you don't have any education in the field, and for example, nutrition, we're talking about science here. It's hard to, differentiate what's good content from bad content, like what's actual evidence-based content versus. Can I curse on the podcast, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay, like you need to separate the good from the bullshit, right? And with social media and YouTube, there's a lot of bullshit out there, and if you're not armed with the tools to kind of separate them, it can actually have a harmful impact on your overall health. Whereas if I'm learning how to optimize my DPS, it's like okay, I'm just gonna do this, by that I'm gonna do more damage, and it's okay. Like if it's bad advice, I'll notice it, but it's not gonna change my life. If someone tells you, hey, you need to cut all carbs, cut all fruits, just eat meat and organs, and then you start feeling a bit like it's probably not going to be great for you. But yeah, I definitely learned a lot from YouTube, and nowadays I'm a bit busier, so I don't have a lot of free time to go on YouTube, but I will say I learned a lot about fitness on YouTube, and then when I actually studied, so the master's degree, a lot of it I was like, I already know this because I've consumed hours and hours and hours of YouTube, and it turns out like everything I learned was from credible sources. So that was, a good thing, I'll say.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. And I think when it comes to like the exercise side of things, um, the risk isn't as high. Like unless somebody's teaching you like very poor form or to do barbell squats on Bosu balls or something stupid like that, that you can be like, that's bullshit. Um, the risk behind that is very low. But like you said, the nutrition side of things, it's like the fucking Wild West. You know what I mean? Like people can't become, or it's much harder for people to become popular by saying the science backed, boring, unsexy things, and so they have to take cherry pick data and spew nonsense like nose to tail, got to eat carnivore. Plants grew up with defense mechanisms to not be eaten, so they're trying to kill you, and it's like, okay, okay. But you have a 17-year-old high schooler who's like, that guy's jacked. He clearly knows what he's talking about. And those are the people that they target.
Yeah, yeah. And with social media, there's a lot of echo chambers nowadays. So you have people that are spewing the misinformation, then you have people that are there, ride or dies. Like they don't necessarily understand if there's any evidence supporting those claims, but since they trust the person that's saying the things, they will take it as gospel. Like this is a fact. And then when you have a lot of people like all saying the same thing, but they're not really sure where it started, that's a bit like
Yeah.
kind of dubious because now you have people assuming one thing, but you don't even know where it started. And I can even give you an example. One of the guys at my gym, like this week, he suddenly he told me, "Hey Miguel, I'm starting a keto diet like this week," and I'm like, "Okay, why are you starting the keto diet?" It's like, I've been watching a lot of TikTok, and when he said this, I was like, "Okay," but he said I've been watching a lot of TikTok, and there's these guys. They say that insulin is bad for you, and insulin makes you fat, and if you eat carbs, it spikes your insulin, and then like I don't want to get fat, so I'm trying out the keto diet, and I was like. I never tell people, so I always like to understand their perspective. I will never be the guy that's like, hey, you're dumb. Because, like, if I say that, you'll probably be like, okay, I don't want to talk to you anymore because, like, you've literally
Right.
discredited all my beliefs. So I want to understand your perspective. So I said, okay, like, tell me more about this. Okay, so you want to try the keto diet. What's the main goal here? Like, are you scared of insulin? It was like, well, I know the insulin part is bullshit, but part of me, I've watched so many videos that I'm starting to believe it. And I'm like, okay, so let's, break this down. When you eat carbohydrates, you know that it's normal for your insulin to go up. And it's like, yeah. And what's wrong with it? And it's like, I don't know. And it's like, there's nothing wrong with it. That's how your body metabolizes carbohydrates. And he was like, yeah, I know. And I was like, but, at the end of the day, if you want to try it out, like, try it out. Because I think he was like on day 2 of the keto diet. And he was like super happy. He was like, yeah, I'm on day 2 and I'm feeling great. And I'm like, yeah, because your body still hasn't adapted to, the ketogenic diet. So ketosis, that's like the first few days you might feel great. But then when your body is kind of more depleted, that's when you feel a bit like lower energy, bit more brain fog because your body's adapting. And some people even call it like the keto flu, which usually lasts like the
Yep.
initial 2 weeks. And it was funny because like a few days later I saw him again at the gym and he was like, I'm on day 5 now. I'm not feeling so good right now. I'm feeling a bit low energy. I'm feeling a bit flat. I don't like this. And I told him, yeah, it's normal. Like you probably have less carbohydrates. Glycogen stores probably lower. So glycogen is how we can store carbohydrates in the muscles. And that's why he looked flatter. And then he was like, I'm going to call it. And when the weekend comes, I'm going to go back to eating carbs. All of this to say, we have a guy that's been training for more than 20 years. A guy that's been eating carbs for more than 20 years. He feels great on his normal diet. But after watching a ton of TikToks talking about how bad insulin is because of carbs, this knowledgeable or somewhat knowledgeable guy, he decided that maybe he was wrong. Maybe he needed to try a keto diet. And I'm not saying keto diets are bad in general and they won't work. Like some people, they thrive on keto diets. I'm not saying that. Like nutrition, unlike what some people make you want to believe, it's not black or white. It's not like this works for everyone or this doesn't work for everyone. So depending on your individual goals, your context, you will need to adjust the strategy. But for most people, especially people that lift, I don't recommend a ketogenic diet. And, again, at the end of the day, I'm not going to tell you what you can or can't do. Unless you're working with me, I'm going to probably recommend some things. But in his case, I just told him, try it out, see how you feel.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I agree 100% with everything you said. It can be, especially when it comes to like TikTok and Instagram and the short form content where they can just constantly keep spewing out nonsense. Gary Brecka has kind of gotten the spotlight for that, where he'll just take like one very small mechanism and blow it out of proportion. And then Lane Norton over here does the same thing, kind of in satire, saying you need to eat more shit because shit has this particular compound that helps you lose weight. But oh wait, you have to eat 50 pounds of shit a day, like literal poop. And it's like that's what happens when you look at one mechanism and blow it up. And so I definitely can see that. And like you said, don't try to belittle them and say their view is dog shit. Just be like, look, give it a try, see how it feels. And you never know. Maybe that guy is like, look, was that missing piece that I had, that I felt like I was missing, and keto is kind of really that next step that I needed. You're like, cool, great, all the best for you. But I'll get similar people, and I'm sure you do as well, where you have the initial consultation with clients, and they're like, yeah, I just need to cut out carbs. I'm like, cool, what makes you say that? And they're like, well, I've been reading, blah, blah, blah. And then they follow that same rabbit hole that you were just talking about. And then if they are a client of mine, I'll be like, okay, well, how about this? Let's just work on, adjusting your calories now. And then we can lower your carbs as we go. Instead of saying, sure, give it a try, see what happens. Because I don't want to set my clients up for failure in that way. Friends, sure,
Yeah, I get that. And, I used to be very, very passionate about my kind of stances on things. Like I would take things personally. I can see it clearly. Like I would have an emotional response. Like if you told me, carbs are bad for you, my initial response would be like, no, they're not. Like, why are you saying that? Like nowadays, I'm like, okay, like why are they bad for you? Like in what context? And are we even talking about the same thing? Because when I say carbs, like I'm not talking about pizza, cookies, donuts. Most people, they don't even know what they're talking about. Like,
Right.
and this is, again, we need to make sure that we're all on the same page when we're talking about similar things like carbohydrates. What are carbohydrates? There are different types of carbohydrates. And for example, when this is just an example sometimes talking to people, when you say you need to eat X grams of carbs or protein, you're not necessarily saying you need to weigh the food and you need to eat, that food, the weight in grams. Like carbohydrates in grams, it's different from weighing your pasta or things like that. And sometimes people, like, again, when you have backgrounds, you might think that everyone thinks the same way you do, but this is something I've realized working with people in this space is that, I used to think, man, I'm creating content that's so basic, like everyone already knows this. Like who wants to know this? Like I'm just repeating what people already know. And then you have questions, like you understand, okay, maybe people don't understand the basics. And that's where most people fail. Because at the end of the day, like I'm not gonna lie, nutrition, there's a lot to it, but you can get a lot of results with the basics. Like if most people make sure that they're eating protein with their meals, they're eating, a minimum of 3 portions of fruits and vegetables per day, they're drinking water, just that's going to help a lot. They have a consistent meal schedule, so that, they eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner usually roughly at the same time. They eat mostly whole foods. Like these are basics. I'm not even going into the science, but if you follow these basics, you will get ahead of, 99% of people that are trying to optimize things with supplements and fasting and trying to, do all of this, but they're not following the basics.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I have a buddy of mine who we play D&D together, and 2 sessions ago, he's like, dude, I just completed a full round of P90X, didn't take a day off, and I didn't lose any weight. I didn't lose a single pound. I'm like, you're eating too much. He's like, that's impossible. I'm hardly eating at all. I'm like, well, by definition, you're eating too much. I was like, how many calories do you eat? He's like, I don't know. I don't track. And I was like, well, download this app right now. I told him download Lose It. Start tracking your calories. He said, I pretty much eat the same thing every day. I'm like, cool, it'd be really easy for you to track. And so he downloaded the app. He started logging. He's a low carb kind of guy, and so his
Mm-hmm.
breakfast alone was 6 eggs, a small avocado, maybe a slice or two of like turkey bacon, and then a couple healthy handfuls of pecans. And logs all that in. He's like, that's like over 1,000 calories. I'm like, no fucking shit, it's not. You know what I mean? It's you have like 100% fat right there. And I was like, you're eating too much. And that kind of really opened his eyes to just simply tracking calories, what that can do, as far as like, ironing out the basics. The next session, which was like a month later, he's like, dude, I'm down 20 pounds. I'm like, yeah, it's crazy what happens when you just start tracking your calories and not even really adjusting what he ate, just how much he ate. And he's like feeling good. Granted, he's 6'10", and he was like 350 or 60. He was to 360, and then he dropped down to the 345. So 20 pounds in a month for him was a realistic number. But he was seeing good progress, much better than he saw in the 90 days of P90X, just by tracking his calories.
Yeah, that's a great example of, it's not just how much you eat in terms of overall food, but how much you're eating in terms of calories. Because that happens a lot. We just said like, I don't eat a lot of food, but then like, yeah, but you're still eating too many calories. And what I mean by that is, so very basic math here, but 1 gram of carbs, 1 gram of protein, that's 4 calories. 1 gram of fats, that's 9 calories. And the breakfast you described, as soon as you said 6 eggs, avocado, and I was like, he's probably going to say nuts. And you said nuts or pecans. And I was like, yeah, very high fat breakfast. That usually, it's almost like, people that say, I don't understand, like I only eat a little bit of peanut butter. And then you're like, okay, but weigh how much that little bit actually is. And, track how many times a day you actually eat that little bit of peanut butter. And then it's like, oh, it turns out I'm eating like 500 calories worth of peanut butter. And, since it's super easy to eat, you don't really feel like you're full. But if you were
Right.
to eat 500 calories worth of, lean proteins, fruits, or vegetables, or even things like sweet potato or other carbohydrates, you'd be like, okay, that's a lot of food. Like, I can't eat that much. And, it's not like, so there's a big difference here. Again, food choices impact your calorie intake, but at the end of the day, you can't escape the law of thermodynamics and being in a calorie deficit to lose fat. So your advice was pretty spot on because it gave him that awareness of it's not that what you're eating is bad, it's just that it's not aligned with your goals in terms of the overall calorie intake.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was a big eye opener for him because he thought if he just stayed away from carbs, he'd be good. Kind of like what you're talking about with your buddy. And I was like, no, dude. He said his pecans alone, depending, it could be like over 700 calories. I'm like, you just cut those out and you're losing weight like right there. I was like, just cut those out
Yeah.
and you're already on a 1 pound a week, more than 1 pound a week weight loss. But yeah, it's crazy. We've kind of skirting around it a little bit, but what's your overall coaching philosophy? And I guess what are some like basics or common faults that you see when you bring on clients? Because it sounds like you do more nutrition than exercise, or you maybe lean heavy that way, or I could be completely wrong.
No, I do both actually. So nutrition and exercise. Um, so that's a great question. Usually, most people come to me with body composition goals. Although I have um, a holistic approach to fitness, and I usually say that fitness is about making all kinds of gains. Because even though you might start by focusing on improving your body composition, and I'm no exception to this. Like when I started as a teenager, I wanted to get a six pack, very shallow, but that's what motivated me back then. And then I started to realize, okay, like you feel better, you sleep better, like energy levels are better, productivity is better, your libido is better. But I also started to realize that, you get physical benefits, you get mental benefits, but you also have to work on your relationship with exercise and food because you might look great and your diet might be quote unquote healthy, but you might feel like shit and you might feel anxious, stressed, or guilty whenever you eat something. So a lot of the clients that come to me, of course, I help them with their nutrition. I educate them on what they need to do to reach their goals, help them with their training, review their training technique, teach them about that. But we also have a bit more of the mindset approach of, how are you feeling with the program? Like I also ask them to track bio markers like sleep quality, stress levels, energy to make sure that we're creating habits that are sustainable and actually are going to last, because I don't want anyone to work with me for 3 months to achieve a radical transformation and then feel miserable and kind of go back to their old ways. So all of this to say, some of the common faults I notice. Number one, people think they know how to train, but they really don't. And I'm not saying that. So there's a big difference between exercising and training. Like anyone can exercise, anyone can go for a workout at the gym, do random machines, random exercises. That's fine. That's going to give you some health benefits. But that's not training. So training is you have a goal, you have a clear progression scheme, like you're moving towards something, you're moving towards your goal. And we know that, for example, to maximize fat loss or muscle growth, like progressive overload, like slowly but surely increasing the stimulus that you're giving your body, making your workouts more challenging, is an important piece of the puzzle. Most of the people that come to me, like they are consistent with training, but they're not consistent with things like tracking their workouts, applying progressive overload. So they're probably lifting the same weight for the same reps for months and years, and they're not seeing progress. Or maybe they're even like maybe they're a bit stronger, but every time they try and push, they injure themselves or they're hurt themselves, or not. That's the same thing. But what I meant is like they can't seem to break that plateau, and it's usually because maybe their technique is off or their training intensity is far from where it needs to be. Like people think 3 sets of 10 is magical. Like if you do 3 sets of 10, you're going to build muscle. Well, that might work if you're a beginner, but eventually 3 sets of 10, it doesn't mean much. It's just like, it's something like 4 sets of 12, 2 sets of 8. Like those are just numbers. A program is much more nuanced than that, as you know. So it's teaching them that it's not just about the numbers, it's actually making things count in the grand scheme of things. Like teaching them what matters for exercise, teaching them what matters for nutrition, be it, fat loss, muscle growth, maintaining a healthy lifestyle. And then the mindset part of things, like the relationship with food. For example, I've had clients that on paper, like everything looked great, fantastic results, fat loss, sustainable, they're progressing, body looks amazing, they feel great. But every time, like we would talk about things like, maybe Christmas or birthdays or something like that, there would be like this anxiety and stress and feeling like, or even like a work trip, like a weekend away. And I'd be like, okay, this is something we need to address because, let's try and get to the root cause here. What's making you feel this way? It's usually like you're scared of ruining your progress. Okay. It's like, okay, why are you scared of ruining your progress? Like we know that fitness is all about consistency. And if we kind of go deeper, and this is something I preach a lot about, there's no good or bad foods. And I'm sure some people will disagree with that. But what I mean by that is if most of your like nutrition or most of your diet is coming from those minimally processed whole foods that are nutritious, they're good for you. And if you have a treat every now and then, it's not going to be the end of the world. It's not going to hurt you in any way, shape, or form. And we were kind of the programming that we have, especially if you're a beginner to fitness, is that you have good and bad foods. Good foods help you with fat loss. Bad foods make you fat. Like it's black and white. So sometimes my job as a coach is to guarantee that we're getting results, but we're doing so sustainably so that, when something goes off plan, they don't feel like they failed. They actually build a strong, resilient mindset, and that helps them to kind of relax because, when you're relaxed and when you're aligned with your goals, things kind of flow. But when you're stressed, it's like there's this resistance and it's just harder to stay on track. And even if I tell you it's okay to eat, let's say, chocolate cake, and even if you love chocolate cake, but you don't feel that internal change, you're going to feel like crap. And then you might do something like do an extra cardio session because you think you have to, or go for like 20K steps because you think you have to compensate in any way. And that's what I help a lot of my clients with. So getting results, but making sure that we're also doing it sustainably, because at the end of the day, the goal isn't just to transform your physique, it's also to give you the tools to sustain those goals for many decades to come.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. A whole lot of good stuff there, a whole lot of gold. One thing I want to kind of piggyback off of is you said that people have that dichotomy, healthy versus unhealthy, good versus bad, having that guilt and shame around those unhealthy foods. I had a client just last week. We're starting tracking calories just to kind of get a baseline, and she's like, "Man, I didn't realize how high calorie ice cream was. I feel bad wanting some." And so I immediately sent her a video. I'm like, "Look, we can't have like I totally understand that guilt and shame around those higher calorie foods, especially when you compare like ice cream versus like broccoli. But what we can do is remove the emotion from it, come at it as like a scientist or an investigator, where we're just tracking data, and then also look at it as our caloric budget, very similar to our financial budget, where a lot of our finances are going to go towards bills and or saving for the future, but we're going to have roughly 20 to 30% for whatever we want, right? Those are the toys, trips, like everything that we want. We're going to have portion of that partitioned off. And so think of our calories like that too, where 80% can be from those whole foods, those nutrient dense foods like you talked about. And then 20% can be whatever the hell you want. It can be that ice cream. And so then now you can say, okay, I'm having this ice cream because it's part of the plan, because I already have it budgeted out. And then you can then ask yourself, this ice cream is 500 calories. Do I have it in the budget, and is it worth spending that many calories? If the answer is yes to both, cool, you can have it guilt-free. If the answer is no to either one of those, would 250 calories fit better? Then you can say yes, cut it in half, put the rest in the freezer, and then you can have it, again, guilt-free. And so once you kind of look at it as a budget, a financial budget, it can help remove the emotion from it, which is much easier said than done. But saying I am actually sticking to my plan by eating this ice cream because I have those calories budgeted to the side to have those guilty pleasures, so to speak, or the indulgent foods, the comfort foods, can really help with that sustainability and have those long-term results like you talked about versus the 12-week turn and burn before and after photo, push them out the door, bring in more and more clients that way, right?
Yeah, for sure. And your 80-20% rule is something I use as well. And it helps a lot to understand that. I also like to tell them, if it's a hell yeah or hell yes, like go for it. Some foods aren't worth the calories. It's just, it is the way it is. And sometimes you will eat things that you think they're going to be worth it, and they're not. Even the other day, I had a client, he messaged me saying, Miguel, I ate this ice cream that I thought was going to be fantastic, and it sucked. And I feel bad, not because I ate the calories, but I feel bad because this was my choice for the day, and it was bad. And I was like, it happens. Like, it happened to me as well many times. And, like, one of the things... So, again, it's easy for us to talk because we're the coaches, right? But even as a coach, like, sometimes people forget we're human too. And I can give you a very practical example. When I started, I was very deep in the bodybuilding world. So, very deep in the whole clean eating, good foods versus bad foods. And again, I have this background in cookery. So, chefs, they don't necessarily care about nutrition. I'm sure some of them try and cook balanced meals, but if we're talking strictly about restaurants, like the main goal of a restaurant is to serve you a delicious meal that will make you go like, wow, this is amazing. I want more of it. I want to come back. And I cooked like that for many, many years. Like, my sole purpose was to cook for flavor and to give you that wow factor. And I was very fortunate because my mom always taught me to, add some veggies, add a protein source, because she's not a nutritionist or anything like it, but she knew the importance of it. So even when I was cooking like full chef mode, I always try to add some veggies for crunch, for like color, even like plating. I always like cook the protein source because like it was just a staple. But my main goal was like, okay, I can give you an example. Like one of the my specialties at the time growing up, everyone loved this. I got the idea from Gordon Ramsay. It was like pork chops, like stir fried with olive oil, garlic, a bit of thyme, paprika, and then the side would be like sweet and sour red peppers. Basically, it has brown sugar, balsamic vinegar, and a bit of red onion, I think. And again, we're adding things like it was pork chops, not necessarily the leanest cut of meat, a good portion of olive oil, adding a bit of fat there. And then with the peppers, again, more olive oil and adding a bit of sugar, which some people would say it's a bad food. And I remember we all love this. Like, we love this dish. But then when I transitioned more into a kind of a bro, I was like, okay, so I need to find an alternative for the pork chops because they have too much fat. I need to use less olive oil because, I can't have all those calories. Um, Sugar, no more sugar with the peppers. Like, vinegar is fine. Sugar is no bueno. And it's still okay, but it's not the same experience. And I'm not saying that you can't, like, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It can be
Mhm.
like that all or something. But um, the main thing here, so I didn't track calories for, man, I've been lifting for almost 12 years. I haven't like tracked calories consistently, maybe the initial, I don't know, 7, 9 years. Because I still don't really track calories unless I have a very specific goal in mind. Like, let's say I want to focus on fat loss and I want to make sure that all the, like, I'm just giving it my best effort. Then, yeah, sure, I might track for a few weeks to make sure that I'm on track. But most of the time, I don't track. So
Mhm.
when I didn't track and I cooked, I was a bit anxious because I had no idea what the calorie value of my meal. I was just looking at foods as good or bad. When I started tracking, I was like, huh, I can actually have a balanced meal and add maybe a bit of sugar to the peppers or add a bit of this. I didn't even have peanut butter for years because it was like, yep, unnecessary fat source. I don't need the calories. Not gonna have it. Like, that was my brain. Like, if it's good,
Right.
it's good. If it's bad, it's bad. Um, but then tracking macros. So some people, they say that you can become obsessive, but for most people, I think it's a fantastic like education tool because it can help you with flexible dieting. Like,
Mhm.
when you look at, let's say, sugar is bad, like, even 1 gram of sugar will make you go like, I can't have that, it's bad. Like, if you actually know that 1 gram of sugar is like 4 calories, and then you look at your budget and you're like, okay, like 4 calories is fine. And you're probably going to say, yeah, but who has 1 gram of sugar? Fine, let's say 10 grams. 10 grams of sugar is already like a decent amount. Like, that's 40 calories. And still not going to break the bank if you want to add a bit of sugar to your peppers or things like that. So again, this is a bit of a tangent here, but just an example of how the mindset uh, evolves as you also, evolve and gain more education and just
Mhm.
put the reps in.
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of us travel that path where it's like in the beginning, it's like everything is bad besides like steamed broccoli and boiled chicken, and then you're like, well, man, just if it fits your macros, just eat whatever you want, as long as it fits your macros. And then it's like, okay, well, maybe we should have a little bit of both, right? Maybe we should have primarily whole foods, but we can have those indulgences, and we can, be kind of loosely tracking calories and macros. Most of my clients, I'll say a vast majority of them track their calories, and then we do a protein goal. But a lot of them, that's where we'll stop. We don't do carbs and fats, primarily because if your calories are where they should be and your protein is hitting that goal, carbs and fats are largely unimportant, especially when you're trying to do like extensive weight loss. If you were trying to do, step on a stage or something like that, we'd be having a different conversation. But none of my clients are competitors in that sense that I know of. But you having an extensive background in cooking and the culinary arts, just even right there, you're really explaining things that were going a little bit over my head. Have you thought about making a cookbook that are like the macro friendly, good tasting meals?
Yeah, for sure. That's actually something that I've been considering for the last year. So, like, on my Instagram, I post a lot of stories of things that I cook, like, because I love cooking. I cook every single day. Like, I cook pretty much most of my meals, except when I'm going out to eat. And what I like about like posting my meals is that for me, like, they're delicious. I know they're nutritious, but they're very basic most of the times. And I post them
Mhm.
on Instagram, and people are like, "Oh, this looks fantastic!" Like, "Oh my god, how did you prep that?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's very very basic." And this is, it might come off as like me bragging, but the fact is, most people overcomplicate things when it comes to cooking, and they think
Mhm.
that it has to be very fancy, very difficult. Like, I have to do this and that, and don't get me wrong, like, most recipe like cookbooks, they have ingredients that you're like, I don't even know where I can find this. But
Yeah.
usually, like, every day-to-day cooking can be very simple, very basic. Just have a selection of proteins that you like, veggies, carbs that you like, and you can get very creative, especially with different like spices. Um, yeah, so long-winded answer just to say, yeah, I've been thinking about that. The kind of macro-friendly, but also not every recipe needs to be macro-friendly. Like some of them for sure, but then sometimes you just want to cook something that is good for the soul. And again, when I say this, it doesn't mean it has to be unhealthy. Like you can have a meal that is nutritious, but it might be a bit more, extra compared to your every day-to-day meals. And that's something I do often as well. Like sometimes I might just have, let me give you an example. Let's say sweet potato, chicken, and some vegetables and fruit. Like that can be a very basic meal. But sometimes I'm like, ooh, I'd love to grab the chicken, maybe get some noodles, stir fry the veggies with the noodles, put the chicken there, maybe put a bit of sauce, some ginger, and then suddenly I have this kind of still very basic, still very easy to prep meal. But I've got sauces going on, I've got more fat, like the calories are higher, but still homemade, delicious, and nutritious meal.
Right, right. No, that's cool. That's cool. I have the D&D Heroes Feast cookbook over there somewhere, and it's very much. Granted, it is exactly what it is. It's like a cookbook for like more medieval fantasy meals, but you're looking at it and like, I've never even heard of half of these ingredients. You go to the store, you get them just for that one dish, and then the ingredients go to waste because you're not using them for something else. And although that's a kind of an extreme example, I think a lot of quote unquote healthy cookbooks are like that, where they might fit somebody else's palate, like the person who designed them, but they don't necessarily fit your palate. And so trying to find something that is a little bit more simpler, that can kind of appease more palates, I think is a pretty powerful tool, because I think, like you said, a lot of people overcomplicate it. We have a few questions left, or I'm sorry, we have a few minutes left. I have a couple questions. It sounds like you and I probably get a lot of our information from similar places, or at least similar people who have similar philosophies. So who are some influences or influencers that you look at, either on social media, YouTube, or whatever, that you can kind of go to kind of continue that education, and you know that they're not going to be full of shit?
That's a good question. So it depends if we're talking more about exercise science or like nutrition, but I'm sure you're familiar with the 3DMJ guys, like more on the exercise. They're mostly like related to bodybuilding style, but Eric Helms is definitely a big one. And what I like about, so when I say 3DMJ, I'm talking about Eric Helms, Alberto Nunez, Jeff Alberts, because I really like their philosophy on training, nutrition side of things, and balance. They work mostly with competitors, so natural bodybuilders. But again, I came from that background, and I find that bodybuilding, even though like I totally understand not everyone wants to be a bodybuilder, but there's a lot of things that like skills that are transferable from bodybuilding to everyday life, like the structure with your meals, planning your meals, making sure you're eating protein, the veggies. Like bodybuilding done right has a lot of benefits, and I think it also teaches a lot of discipline, which is discipline and structure, which helps a lot of people. So those guys for sure. Like Mike Israetel from Renaissance Periodization is like a big name right now in the industry. I have clients, like Gen Pop clients, that are telling me, hey, this guy popped on my YouTube recommendations. Is he legit? And I'm like, yes. Like I'm glad this is happening, because out of everyone that could be like popping, this guy definitely deserves the praise. Guys like Lane Norton have been around for many, many years, like you've mentioned. Great, especially busting nutrition myths, things like that. Even more recently, so man, I've talked to a lot of people in the industry, and I think you can always learn a bit from pretty much everyone. But those guys, I'd say, they're the ones that I learned a lot from, because I even read the muscle and nutrition pyramids from by Eric Helms. When I said I was consuming a lot of fitness content back in like 2019 or so, a lot of it was Renaissance Periodization. I will say like Jeff Nippert has some cool stuff, and I do like seeing his content every now and then, but it's not like something that I would go like, oh my god, I need to educate myself watching these videos. But when I was a teenager, it definitely helped a lot. And then again, when I started learning more about how to read research, because it's not just about reading the abstract, you actually need to understand, the methodology and how the researchers actually arrive to those conclusions.
Hmm.
But one of the cool things is that I read a lot of research reviews, and right now I'm subscribed to Mass,
Yeah.
and I like in my free time just reading more about that, like upcoming research. So in a way, I guess those guys are kind of mentors as well, because you get to read the research and then also see what the experts are saying. But that's what comes to mind, especially like fitness and nutrition, because then we could go on like off on a tangent of the holistic approach and like the lifestyle itself. Because at the end of the day, like I love training, I love nutrition, but life is more than that.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with and follow all those guys that you talked about as well. I'm subscribed to Mass, but I haven't really dove into it in a long time since the pandemic, essentially. Um, but cool. One somewhat last question. It's kind of a slide question. Have you seen the show The Bear?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite shows.
Okay, I figured. I watched that. I probably binged it in like a week, both seasons.
it,
And it's just like pure anxiety the whole time. And I worked at Applebee's as a server for 5 years, and I know that's kind of like a far cry from what they were doing, but I'm like, I could definitely see how they took the restaurant life and maybe dialed it up to like 11, which very well may be very common in a more higher up restaurant that is not Applebee's.
yeah, like I love that show, and man, it reminded me. So I watched that show with my brother, and again, I've worked in restaurants and hotels, and I told him I love this show for two reasons. Number one, it's a good show, but number two, it takes me back to like working in the field and being stressed as fuck, because like I have memories of like sautéing like I don't know, meat, and having a chef yelling like next to me like cook it faster, and I'm like, how the fuck am I supposed to cook faster? It's like I'm doing everything I can. It's like just yelling at you, and it's hot, it's stressful, and you can get burned, you can cut yourself. Like I cut myself often, just again because you're doing stuff and sometimes things happen. But yeah, I like The Bear because you feel stressed and anxious, but as a working in the kitchen, sometimes that's how it feels. The pressure builds up.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, I feel like they really did a good job capturing that anxiety. Cool. So my somewhat last question, now my actual last question: if you were to create a character sheet for yourself in real life, what class would you be?
Ooh, damn, that's a good question. So man, one of my favorite genres when it comes to gaming, RPGs, right? So uh, like I used to play, going back to World of Warcraft, I used to play a hunter growing up because I always loved the whole ranged, having a pet with me. But
Mm-hmm.
as I grew up, I naturally like I just started liking more the whole warrior archetype and being on your own. Like I'm a big fan of like Nordic mythology or just mythology in general, but especially like Viking stuff,
Mm-hmm.
warriors. And then I started training, and I'm getting jacked and whatnot, and people are like, oh, you're getting the muscles, bro, and I'm like, okay. So I like the warrior side of things when it comes to that physical like aspect, but I like kind of the warrior, well, like mix a Viking with a samurai in terms of you have a guy that can be brutal and just create carnage and go crazy in the battlefield, but you also have that side like more reserved side of the samurai and the whole like harmony and like understanding things. So what I'm trying to say is I like to think of myself as a guy that I take care of my fitness. If you look at me and like you can think, oh, this guy's a meathead or something like that. Then I also have that my more like philosophical side to me of I really like to think about things and think about life and how at the end of the day all of this is finite. We're just kind of evolved monkeys on a planet that's floating in space and things like that. So
Mm-hmm.
I guess I would, if I'm creating character sheets, like strength, HP, stamina, all that good stuff with the physical. But then I don't know if we would have like stats for. I definitely put stats in something like charisma, but also intelligence, and
Hmm.
I'd put like emotional intelligence, not just intellect.
Right. Sure. No, it sounds
I'm
like,
not
I
sure
mean,
if
if
that.
it did, it did.
Yeah, go
I
for
mean,
it.
if we were to put it in like D&D terms, it almost sounds like a monk, where you're able to whoop ass, but then you're going to meditate afterward.
Could be, yeah.
Cool, cool, awesome, Miguel. It was wonderful talking with you, like always. Why don't you give a quick drop on how anyone can get a hold of you?
Yeah, and I just want to say, thank you for having me on because it was a great time being on the podcast. Um, you can find me on Instagram. That's where I'm most active. It's at Miguel D Mendes with an S. So that's very, very easy. And then basically my website is also migueldmendez.com. Very original. But yeah, that's where I'm most active on. And I'm also looking forward to having you on my podcast.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, I appreciate it, and we'll definitely make sure that happens. Everyone, give him a follow, and until next time.